All right, so let's talk about the most basic part of this whole API solution, and that is getting data from a source. So I have a very basic example here. Is a web page that pulls in a title and then item 01, item 02, item 03, item 04, and item 05. And every time I hit refresh, we get different values. So we're going to walk through how I did that. And just so you know, the data is coming from this. This is a PHP page I wrote that creates a different, it creates a JSON source, a JSON, I would call it an object, a JSON object. And it sends the JSON object to, or I should say it's just a JSON object. And this page goes and gets that JSON object and takes the data and puts it into here. So let's set up how I do that and get going with this. So the one thing I do want to point out is that as we go through and do this, none of these examples are going to work when you run them from your computer. You are going to have to upload them to the server over and over again to get this to work. I know that is such a pain, but that's going to be the only way it's going to work. So with that being said, let us open Visual Studio Code. Let me open my folder from this week. APIs, all right. So we have nothing in there yet, so we're going to get started. Let us go ahead and create a new page. Create a new page, index.html. All right, and we'll set up our page like normal. So get our HTML going. All right, so that's our basic HTML page, of course, like usual. I'm going to go ahead and give this API data in class exercise. Save that. And let's get started. So first, let's create an area that we'll be able to load our data into. And so to do that, we just need a basic list. And you don't always need a list. I'm just doing this because this is an example. Probably don't even need that. Actually, I'm not going to do a list. That just feels like it's going to be more complicated. So I'm going to do a page, sorry, paragraph, and I'll say title. And I'll put a tag span ID equals title. And then I will do, that in quotes, there we go, a slash span. My gosh, I'm just missing keys. In between, I'll put loading. Okay, dot, dot, dot. Now, I will get used to uploading this to my server. So I'm going to use my tool, which I use a tool called Transmit, which is the exact same as CyberDuck. So don't feel like, I mean, it looks exactly the same as you do it. Document 9, 13 API. Okay. So here's my page. I'm going to create a new folder over here. My server is so overcrowded. 13. Okay. All right, so here's week 13. I move index over. Great, it's there. I'm now gonna open my page here. Week 13. I made it a folder. Oh boy. Title loading. Perfect. Okay, look at that. Doesn't do anything yet. That's fine. That's what we're doing. All right. So now let's start figuring out how we can add some code and such. Where's my code? There's my code. Okay. All right. So I also am going to, I put title in there, but we're going to do the same thing. We'll change it from title to be item 01. And this will be item 01. Now, while I'm typing this stuff out, I want you to think, why did I do a span tag and why did I do an ID tag there? You know? Just want you to think about that as we go. Not a div tag, but a span tag. See if you can remember back to some of your HTML time or something you learned in class. All right. So I have this. Now I'm going to create a new JavaScript file. Script.js. I'm going to save that. I'm going to definitely move that over here so it's all there. Great. All right. This is where Visual Studio Code is so weird to me because I would think that there should be a direct tool in here. So having to use CyberDuck, we can just use these tools to just move the stuff back and forth to the server. It's not. I think I remember from the first week that when I did look into it, it was kind of crazy what was required. And I didn't feel comfortable with any of those solutions. So that's why we're still using CyberDuck or whatever tool you want to use. Okay. So what do we do for our JavaScript? Well, we can essentially run some code. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a tool called fetch. It's a, I don't know what it is. I feel like it is a method, but I think it's a newer method compared to the way that we used to get files. But so it's not an object. We don't have to instantiate anything. We just have to type fetch, fetch, and then we type the URL that we want. In our case, my URL is that data one, right? So let's get that URL. So fetch that. I, of course, should have had that in quotes. Okay, so that's in quotes. And then here's where the structure is a little different than anything we've done in JavaScript, which I feel like every week has been this for you guys. I'm so sorry. Hey, this is a little different than last time. Remember how I taught you this other thing? Okay, so in reality, it's not that complicated. What it looks like you do is you do this. So you do fetch, then you literally write dot then, as in what's next. Okay, well, what's next is we deal with the response back. So it fetches that page and it pulls something back. And so we actually just type function response. So what we're doing is we're making a little function here. I'm gonna move that down. Function response, and then we do that syntax that we've done before where we create a function on the fly. And in this case, we write if the response, if not, so the exclamation point is not response dot okay. So if it's not okay, we throw an error, which I'm going to do that right now. We'll worry about that later. Don't worry about that. All right, so with the response, when we have a response, we're going to return response.json. So that means whatever text comes in, we're going to send it back out as a JSON object, okay? And then you follow the same pattern again. So we then go return dot then. And so it's going to take this object and pass it to the next thing. And so the next thing says, okay, function data. So what do we want to do with our function? Well, we seem to want to dot document dot get element by by ID. What element? This is why we did a span tag, because we can get just this little area right here. We can actually do something with it without interfering with any of this stuff over here. So it looks like it's title. Get element by ID. Title. And we can set the dot text content, which we've definitely touched. We've used this before. Equals the data, which is what it pulled in. And it's, of course, going to pull in the JSON file that it pulled from here. So it cascades, this whole thing cascades down. Data dot title. All right. And then we are going to do the same thing with item 1. And we change this to data dot item 01. And we know that that is true because when we look at our file here, we have title and we have item 1. So in this case, it's 9. Here it's 7. You know, there's an item 2, an item 3, an item 4, and item 5, but we're not going to look at that right now because I want to just get the basics of this going. And I think that's going to work. I think that's going to work. Let's find out. Let's go here in the head. Let's say script source equals script.js defer. You know, that means it doesn't load till the end. Script. All right, save. Now, of course, I do have to move it, and I have to run it off the server. I cannot run it locally. Let's go to my page. There we go. It's kind of cool, I'm not gonna lie. So we were able to pull that together using fetch. Let me get back to my code. There we go. So again, what's going on here is there is this item. Call out to another data source. This is the URL you are calling. This is what to do with the raw data you get back from the URL. This, of course, is convert raw data, because I know what the data is structured as. Convert raw data to JSON object. And I know that it can be a JSON object because this is a JSON this is a string right now. And what I'm doing with this response.json is I'm converting that string to an object, which we did the other day, last week in the OOP. And then what to do with the previous function. So this function returns it, and it takes that as the input for the next one. So like I said, it cascades. And then we just do some basic stuff we've been doing. Document.getElementById, get element by ID, title. .text content is going to be equal to data.title. And document.getElementById text content, or item 1, is the data. And of course the data comes from, the data is here, it's inputted there. And it is inputted there because that is the output. I'm sorry about these pop-ups. That is the output of this convert to JSON. And the convert to JSON is the output of what gets sent raw from this website. All right, like I said, it is not a super complicated feature, but we are now able to connect, and we are able to get data from our from a server. So let's try a more realistic example of this using some freely available weather data.